Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Whatever time of day it is and whatever day it is, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of Eric Herman for Kansas House 53. This is episode 10, and we're going to talk about free speech or misinformation. And before I before I get into all of that, let me go ahead and offer you an apology for the overall audio-video quality and my stuttering and my dog bothering me that you can't see. But I also want to just acknowledge that this is for people of voting age. I don't think there's going to be anything too vulgar inside this episode, but I'll just acknowledge that before we get started. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So episode 10, free speech, misinformation. Now, this came about from a Meet the Candidates event that was held at the local library, which was a really amazing experience. I got to meet my Democrat Party opponent, and the Republican opponent wasn't there. I was hoping to meet him also, just because I wanted to just say hello to people, and everyone there was really nice, and I really thought, like, going into it, was going to be more or less a lot of old people, because I just really wasn't expecting too many young people to want to go to the library and talk politics for a fairly small race. But actually, there were young, middle-aged, and old people there, and any other sort of demographic of diversity that you want to scale on, and I thought that was really cool. So, but anyway, at one point, there were three persons that were talking to me, and I believe that they had mentioned that they were all registered Democrats, and they were talking about misinformation, and they were talking about things relating to more or less COVID and vaccines, and they were talking about government stepping in because there's all these people posting things on the social medias or whatever about COVID vaccines, causing autism or sterilizing you, or the government's implanting chips in you to track you and things like that, and how that needs to get censored. Buddy, I can't play right now, okay? You have to go away. Just give me a couple of minutes. I do think this episode should be fairly short. So anyway, let me just state that I agree with that, in the sense that I don't think the COVID vaccine causes autism. I don't think it's planting government chips in you. But you're going to have to kind of make your own decisions about things. And I've talked to them about, like, how, before the internet, misinformation has always existed. I grew up in an era where we would constantly hear things like, just because you saw it on TV doesn't mean that it's true. And for the same reason that before that it was the radio, and before that it was the newspaper, and before that it was just because some stranger rolls into your town on a horse and starts talking to you about crazy sea monsters or dragons or whatever the story was back in the old days, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So you as a person, I think that as a libertarian, of course, that's what I value the most, is a person's individuality. Is you as a person are going to have to cipher through the noise and figure out what it is that you want to believe in, because I do have some notes here. I'm going to kind of semi-go off on them, or semi-follow them. I'm going to go off because, as I was saying, like, there are people out there that believe in evolution. There are people out there that believe in creationism. You're not going to just change and the people that have these beliefs, they are so firmly believing in them that they just think that the other people are wrong. And I'm just like, look, here's the thing. I don't know if you know this or not, but you weren't around 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, or 1,000,000,000 years ago. So all you can kind of do is you can take a certain amount of evidence or stories or whatever and come to your own conclusions, because that's all it is. The science changes throughout the years. Like, the science was creationism. It took misinformation for it to become evolution. Or I often talk about, like, when people talk about how, the earth goes around the sun, right? I agree. I agree with that statement. However, I can't prove it to you, okay? So all I'm doing is I'm just regurgitating somebody else's statement based solely off of faith, not because I have some sort of astronomical abilities that kind of sort of decipher how I can understand that has to be true. So there's just so much information out there that you have to understand that just because you have faith in science doesn't mean that you don't have faith in something. You're just having faith in something else. But to try to go back to the vaccines and stuff like that. as I was saying about the vaccines, let's just say putting chips in you. I don't think the government's doing that. They already can track you with your cell phones and your credit cards and everything else. They don't need to be doing that. But I will say this, if I could somehow like fast forward to the future several hundred years, and if that was true, that there were chips in the COVID vaccines, would it surprise me? No, it really wouldn't. Another thing that I thought of, for at least this video, I don't think I mentioned it to them, but when I first moved here to Topeka, Kansas, I went to Kansas City for an event, and this was in maybe May of 2021. So people were kind of getting sick and tired of the whole COVID situation, right? Like it felt like we had been in lockdown for over a year. And I happened to go to a meetup event at a board game bar just for something fun to do, as a personal thing to do. And anyway, we're sitting around, we're playing the things, and at one point, some person that we were playing games with mentioned something about the vaccine coming from a lab. And there was a younger gentleman there who clearly was just fully entrenched with the Democrat Party, Dr. Fauci, the CDC, and all that sort of stuff, where he kind of freaked out. He was like, oh, no, it came from a bat in a market, and you need to know that because that's what the truth is. And at one point, the guy was just kind of like, clearly he was just like, man, dude, like, we're just having, like, have a joke, have some fun, as if I know, as if I'm like sitting there tracking down bats or tracking down vaccines from, or viruses from farmers markets. You know what I mean? Like all I can do is absorb information, analyze it, and come up with my own conclusion on what I want to choose to believe in. It doesn't mean that it's right, it's just my own thing. So, anyway, moving on. At one point in this conversation, one of the persons brought up, well, you can't yell fire in a theater. And so I did a little bit of research into that sort of statement, and the idea is that, when it comes to free speech, okay, you cannot use your free speech to more or less intentionally cause bodily harm or gross negligence to cause harm or death. Like the idea of like you yell fire in a crowded theater and then somebody dies because they get trampled to death. But that being said, what if there wasn't a fire but you thought there was a fire? And so you yell fire and, whatever happens, happens. Like, that's just speech. That's not gross negligence or intentional harm. And the reality is that when you look at situations like this is where I think, I've also brought this up. I'm like, you cannot legislate things perfectly. That's what the judicial branch is for, where the legislature goes and they do the best that they can to micromanage things as best as they can, but the world is complex and you cannot micromanage everything. You cannot predict the future. And then all of a sudden something happens. They're like, oh, wait, how do we handle this situation? The law didn't cover it. What do? You go to the judicial branch. And I do find that Democrats, at least that sort of mentality or that sort of voter, they really are expecting the government to make things not just right, but almost perfect, if I can say that. And I have so little faith that anyone can make things perfect, whether it's the government or me getting elected or the preacher or the teacher, or your parents. Like, people can only do their best. That's the only thing that you can do. And as I was telling them, I was like, okay, like, regardless of what the situation is, whether you're talking about COVID vaccine misinformation or misinformation about, because that whole fire in the theater thing started because some socialist was spreading out political flyers about trying to turn America socialist. And America had a problem with that. And he's like, no, I have the free speech to spread socialism. So the idea is that people have to be allowed to speak. And knowing what is a lie and what is a truth can be very, very complicated And for there to be some sort of authority that is this all-knowing authority that can control that perfectly, it's just not going to happen. But let's just say you had faith that I am smart enough to be that authority. Well, thank you for that and your vote and getting me elected. But even if I took that power, what about in a couple years when I'm not in office? If I lose in the following election? Or what about in 100 years? When who knows who's going to be elected to what offices? The idea is that the government should not be having the power of speech, because it's always the people that kind of go against the path are the ones that inspire change. So anyway, another thing that came up in that court case about the whole yelling fire in a theater was it's gross. It was talking about kind of like gross negligence or like intention to deceive. Like if you believe in something and you tell a lie, that's okay. Like if you believe that Santa Claus is real and you say Santa Claus is real and everyone's like Santa Claus isn't real and we're all like, yeah, okay, we get it, Santa Claus isn't real, but some weirdo over there literally believes that Santa Claus is real, then they can be saying that. It's kind of the same thing that happened with honestly, President Trump when he was talking about how he won the election in 2020. I don't think he did. But do I think that he thinks he did? Yeah, I do. I kind of can see why he would think that. And it's just to kind of try to sum it up, like I was saying earlier, it's a slippery slope. And it goes against everything that the First Amendment says, let alone if you just take a little bit of time and you just think about whether or not you want someone controlling how you speak. It just blows my mind, which kind of brings me up to some current events here for those of you who saw like Eminem doing something at a Kamala Harris rally. And I just think of like Eminem, being more or less a vulgar rapper, and I'm a big fan of his. I think I like his music. It's awesome. I like his sort of "F you, take no prisoners" sort of approach to how he does his music and his lyrics. And some people are offended by that, and I'm like, great. I like offensive shit. So deal with it. You don't have to listen to it. But he's up there and he's arguing for the Democrats, the people that are trying to control hate speech or misinformation or make a Department of Truth or whatever it was called. And I'm just like, who are you campaigning for? Like, and then like I think of some of the lyrics that he was saying about Cheney, and I just think of like how Liz and Dick Cheney are all about Kamala Harris, and it's just like, wow, like what a 180 of a character. So anyway, I think I'll wrap that up for this video. I just want to say, free speech, absolutely, 100% free speech. I don't care how hateful it is. I don't care how hurtful it is. I don't care how much of a blatant lie it is, because even if the government tries to control it on one website over here or over there, like what, you think you're literally going to control every single conversation in a bar? Like where does the big brother end? It's Orwellian. It's what it is. It's Orwellian, and it's dangerous, and it's bad, and I absolutely applaud people speaking their mind. And in fact, I think if I do make another Lawn episode, I think the next thing I get to do is I think I might do some hate mail that I've gotten. And I've read a few comments. I didn't want to read them all because I kind of wanted to actually do it live and be surprised by a few of them. But it's kind of funny, like some of the things that people say. And I'm like, oh, you think I look stupid? Awesome. I think you should be allowed to call me stupid. Go ahead and type it down in the comments if you want to. All it does is just help the algorithm anyway. So, anyway, I guess that's it. Have a good one. Bye.